Are you looking for a podcast where you can hear from real people regarding their real dental drama? If so, then you've come to the right place. Join hosts Bethany Petty and Dr. Rena Kuba as we dive into the solutions we've created and the mistakes we've made while managing dental drama. Let's get started.
Okay, well, we're back, and I want to continue kind-of-ish our talk from last time, or at least use the same example.
Okay.
I had a couple of things in here. So, for example, the example we talked about last week was drama that got created because the doctor and the office manager were already kind of at each other, if you will, and then blah, 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 something got to her ears and how she interpreted that and then got upset about it. And he being, the way he is, had no idea that what he said would have A, been interpreted that way, and B, spread like wildfire around the office and creating drama. So we dissected that quite a bit last time. I guess what we didn't dissect that I wanted to know more about was, okay, so if the doctor and the office manager are at odds, like my bile is rising just thinking about that and about the tension behind that, because those are the two leaders then of the office. And they always say, like, everything starts with us. Like, if there's a problem at the top and it trickles down. So I'm like, if they're having issues, then how are they solving them? Why are they having issues? Can you give any insight into maybe both of their personalities or leadership styles or whatever? And then the specific incident that I think you had said that was the near blow up point more recently was the firing process. And so kind of wanted to talk about that as a specific example, and then kind of just circle around and see if we can come up with some solutions for listeners. And then if we have time, which we may not, but I was reached out, a colleague of mine reached out and was asking about something. And then he happened to share that a employee, like his best assistant, gave their 2 weeks because I guess this assistant is a male, and he's going to, it wasn't even he got a part-time job in dental. It was, I don't know, a hardware store, something odd, something random, but it's going to give him the flexibility to only work 2 to 3 days. It's close to his house. He wants to go back to college and be an electrical engineer. And so just all the things that we've talked about recently on different podcasts, like here, now your employee comes to you. And I think for my colleague, he was blindsided. He didn't see this coming at all. And then I kind of said, well, did you even try to ask, would you be open to, if he only wants 2 or 3 days, is that something you could make happen? And is that something? And so he, I said, did you even try to retain him? And he's like, basically, I didn't know that was an option. He's like, well, he's already set. I'm like, but is he? And so I actually sent him links to our 2 podcasts that we had done probably, about a month-ish or so ago. So one was, have you talked about trying to retain? And then I said something like, building in backups for your employees. And he was like, what are you talking about? Like, how do I build in backups? And I was like, dude, I don't have time for this conversation right now, but we will, let's get dinner and we can kind of talk through. But I thought that would be a good topic for
And I feel like they go hand in hand, like the hiring process and then also always preparing for a backup plan. I feel like those two should almost always go together. And you're right, most people don't think about the backup plan. They hire in the moment as it's needed, but aren't necessarily constantly thinking about a backup plan. So yeah, hopefully we can get to that too. So.
Yes. So let's start with, if you are okay with, going back to the doctor and the office manager who are kind of at odds. And you said the tension has been rising because it's been 8-9 months of constant hiring, constant replacements. So I guess my initial question for you is, do they get along otherwise, and this is what's caused the tension to come up, or do they still, is it their style, is it their personalities? Because you and I are big on the personalities and things like that. So is that finally hitting a head, and it was only exacerbated by this whole firing process? Can you give us some more background on it, and then?
I absolutely think personalities are at play in this particular scenario. You've really got 2 opposite people that are trying to manage the same office. And my client, the dentist, is very type A, choleric, task driven, like, oh gosh, there's a vacancy, we just need to hire, and very black and white.
So real quick, can you, like, what age group is he?
Yeah, he is in his 40s.
Okay.
Somewhere.
And then you said choleric. For anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about, of course, we've got a podcast from a while back that you can go back and learn all about that. There's way different personality assessments. So the one we're talking about is...
the Personality Plus assessment.
Okay, so can you briefly talk about what a choleric...
Yeah. So a choleric is a person that's driven by one thing, which is accomplishing tasks. They like to be busy, and they like to get a lot accomplished. So a successful weekend for a choleric is, how much was I able to get accomplished this weekend? It brings them personal satisfaction and fulfillment. Now, the downside to a choleric is they can be very direct. They can be so task focused that they're not thinking about the emotion involved in a situation. They're not thinking about the gray area. And I know I've said this before, but when I was managing my dad's office, his critique, at first I didn't know it was a critique, and then I realized it was a critique, was always, Bethany, you're so black and white, and there is gray out there. And there is gray. And so cholerics really have to learn to figure out nuances, to figure out, well, yes, this is the black and white plan, but I could pivot here and bend on this or think about this differently. His office manager is much more processes things through the feelings.
Now you're talking back about this client, not
This
your
particular-
dad. Your client.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Yeah,
Thank
okay.
you. Yes. Back to the client that we were talking about. So my client is a cleric and a man and in his mid 40s. And I think all of that kind of builds a picture for just a very efficient, task oriented, not a lot
very
of feelings, type person. And then you kind of pair with an office manager that processes things through emotions. Emotions first, and then logic comes in. She's incredibly smart, brilliant young lady. Young, so in her 20s somewhere. And she tends to... she's a great problem solver. I know we talked about that in one of our episodes. So a fantastic problem solver. She also is very task-oriented, but she's feelings first. So she's what I would call a sanguine choleric. Sanguine means I process things emotionally. I am driven by being liked by people. My goal in life is to have really great relationships. And then I can easily get wounded in...
sensitive.
Sensitive is the right word. And so I think naturally they are opposites. And so that's my husband and myself. He's a sanguine, I'm a cleric. So I have to really think about things that I'm saying and be very careful with how I say it, because I can wound unintentionally in the process. And then at the same time, he has to amp up his task-driven nature at times. And we have to work on that. So I think it's important to know the other person's communication style and what they need. It doesn't always mean that we can supplement enough in the process. It does, however, impact everything. So we talked about how they were having like a hiring problem. So they've both been hiring. They're going to approach the hiring situation very differently, right? So for the choleric doctor, he's just going to go, there's a vacant seat. I need it to be filled. I have a very clear idea, even if it's unspoken. I have a very clear idea of what I want, and I know exactly what I'm going to do. So you pair that with somebody that sees a lot more gray. When this office manager interviews people, she's getting a feel for people. She cares about their credentials, but more importantly, she kind of cares about how the feeling of that interview went. My cleric doctor could care less about the feelings of that. He just knows, do they have A, B, C, and D? And then, hey, can I work with them? She's looking at it in a much different lens. So when throughout this 8 or 9 months of hiring, and this person didn't work out, now we're hiring again, they started to realize how differently they approached the hiring situation. So their solution was, we'll divide and conquer. You, doctor, hire for your assistants. I'll hire for the front office. Well, The problem is the doctor still wanted essentially to have a little bit of a say-so in that process. I mean, he's going to be paying the person. He wanted to have some say-so, but that wasn't clearly
that person's
communicated.
his representative. Like, every person you hire represents you and your office and your goals you're trying to achieve.
Exactly. And he's more easily able to see from an assistant standpoint if that person meets the cut or not. But from a front office standpoint, he's not going to interface with that person very often. So he really is putting a lot of trust in the office manager to pick somebody that fits the culture of the office that he's going for. Well, they just continue to kind of disagree on who that person should be, what is a good candidate, what's not a good candidate. And as I was talking with you about this situation, you mentioned a really good point that I think is worth talking about here. And a point that I hadn't really thought about until we were kind of unpacking this, but 8 to 9 months of two people that approach things very differently, but they're combined on the same task, the same repeated task of hiring. And you asked a question, which I think is really important here. You said, well, who else was involved in that hiring process? And I said, nobody. It was just the two of them. So all this weight on these two people hiring, both working together, but rubbing against each other in that process and going, no, I see things differently. I disagree with you. I don't think that's a good candidate because of X, Y, Z. So they're kind of not only 8 to 9 months of hiring, which is exhausting in and of itself, but then you add in the personality differences, and now we've got another layer of conflict that can ultimately be brewing in this whole process.
And dare I say, and you stop me if this is wrong, but then you factor in their age on top of that, and then their gender on top of that, and there are just certain things that we're going to see through different lenses. And that's where, when I was asking you, I said, wait a minute, so who like, if I think you said the latest person that she hired for the front, and he walked by and he's like, I don't like that person. She's not bubbly enough to sit there and all of that. And then this is where the office manager was like, what the hell? Like, this is a person I've just hired, And so I kind of see it from her viewpoint, because I am also a feely person. And I'm like, how dare you come in, and this is the person I picked, and here it's go time. The person's here. We've hired. I've done the onboarding paperwork. I've done all of that. And now you're going to say something like, where were you this whole other time? And if that mattered to you, then how come I didn't know that mattered to you? So I would have my feelings hurt. I would be like, do you not trust me? Or just do it your damn self then, like that. And that's where I would be like, I'm done with this. I'm out of this equation. And so I guess that's where I was asking you, did he give his input at any point? Did he have a list of things that she needs to go by? Did he ever communicate to her? And you said, no, not really. I'm like, well, dude, 8 to 9 months of that? Not really.
That's frustrating.
So it's like, is she supposed to be a mind reader? Yeah. I guess at that point. And so I would want to know, even from her, like, if I've tasked her with it, what are you looking for?
Yeah.
Like, who's gonna cross your threshold of who you will interview, who you won't interview, how are you interviewing, what are you asking, and same, if I was her, I would want to know from his side, because he's cleric, he's probably going down a checklist. Do you have an RDA? Check. Do you have your BLS? Check. Do you have your nitrous? Check. Do you know Dentrix? Check. Like, he's probably going through and he's like, perfect candidate. And watch him hire somebody that, yes, meets all the qualifications on paper, but then the entire office hates this person. So I haven't asked you if that's what's happened, but I can almost imagine that probably has in the last 8 or 9 months, that it just wasn't a right cultural fit.
Exactly. Yeah.
But she would have made sure the cultural fit would have been fine. Mm-hmm. So I think, when you look at this, then, so my question is, well, that's a lot of pressure for her to now know that she's not made Doctor happy, to think that she's given her heart and soul to this, and that he's still not happy, and that now he's taking one aspect of what he's seen. Well, she's not bubbly. Yeah, but what all can she do? Well, now you're just going to discard her, and do you not have faith in my recommendations and what I was looking at? So I could see how that would make her very defensive and very irritated and very upset. And maybe that's not what he meant. Maybe he was just making an observation about this person not being super bubbly. But, maybe in his own mind, he's like, well, I don't like that. And maybe he's like, I'm going to keep an eye on her. But now he's verbalize this and now feelings are hurt.
Exactly.
And so for me, then I started going, that's a lot of pressure for one person to have to take the brunt of success or failure for incorporating and hiring and doing all of this. So my question is, why not? Like, I guess initially you said that it's a relatively young team because they've had a lot of turnover. And then you mentioned that the hygienists have been there for a while. So then my next question was, well, did they get involved in some form or fashion? And maybe they were. I don't know. But I guess to me, the point is, how do you do your hiring process and who are you looking for? And just because that, yes, you're the one who's going to pay the person, but they've got to get along with the entire team. So what is your hiring process? What questions are you asking? How did this person get hired and the doctor had never met her?
Yeah.
Like, that's odd to me. So, and that to me, I'm like, but that's doctor's fault. That's not office manager's fault. That's doctor's fault for not, engaging sooner. And then to come in and like kick the sand on her sandcastle, like, no, sir.
Yeah.
Like, you had your chance. You knew we were hiring. Anyway, so I guess bringing it back to who do you involve?
Well, and I think it's such a valid question in this particular scenario because I think not only has the weight of hiring for this office been on two people, which is exhausting, but then to your point, the team has their own personalities. They can assess a candidate very differently than even the leadership can. And so I feel like when we've got a deeper interview process, and maybe we don't have a ton of people on our team that we can run this person past, but even if it means we invite them to come for an interview at 11:15 and then they're invited to stay for team lunch at noon, and the two people that are on my team can sit and chat with this lady. So I don't have a manager. I don't have anybody else. It's just me doing the hiring. But how else can I involve my team? Let them meet her in a social setting, not in an interview setting. Just arrange something. Or I've got some clients that are like, hey, take this candidate out to lunch and give me your feedback. And again, that's involving the whole team. You don't have to do that. The way that you do it is a few certain people are more involved in the interview process, but you get feedback from the whole team. And I think spreading out the weight of assessing the candidate is very helpful. It minimizes the stress on the leadership. Now, obviously, they're still the ones doing the bulk of the work, but it allows a different perspective that they may not be getting as they're in the trenches trying to hire.
So I think one thing that a lot of people might be thinking is, well, I only had 2 people apply. This is the only candidate that applied. Like, so of course I'm going to hire them. I would say you might be hiring them now only to turn around and fire them. So, and maybe that's what you need to do. Maybe you literally need to do that to get through this next month. But then I would say don't get too comfortable. Like, continue to look and continue your efforts. Because I think that's what a lot of us do is go, phew, I filled that seat. Now I can go back and refocus on something else. So if you didn't fill it with the right person, and of course you're thinking, but who else is there? This was the only one. Well, that's the only one right now. And for me, I'd rather not fill it with just somebody. And so we had, again, back-to-back 2 people. Like in March, we had, literally 2 back-to-back that I hired kind of quickly. But again, they were at the one time, the one was really the only one who really responded. And I think, on paper, what did I like about her? Well, she wasn't a dental person, so I really didn't like that. But she did have longevity at both of her jobs, and I liked that, which takes me back years ago when you and I were kind of, 2 or 3 years into working together, and I was like, oh, you can help me hire? And you're like, yeah, I do that for a lot of people. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. And you were looking through, and a lot of the resumes you sent me, I'm like, whoa, this person wouldn't have met my threshold. Yeah. And you're like, but why not? And so I hadn't communicated to you the way I look at these resumes. And then you were like, yeah, but then you're missing this, this, and this. And you had great points. Yeah. So anyway, it was just, again, I think we all assume that the way we would hire and who we're hiring is universal. And dare I say, I don't think it's at all, even within 2 people in the same office. I think if you had 10 resumes in front of all of us, we would all pick maybe same one, but our second, I don't think any of us would pick the same 2 resumes.
Well, and those perspectives are valuable.
Yeah.
I think we see it as opposite, like, oh no, we can't we can't come to terms on this. But to me, I see it as very valuable. If I look at a resume differently than you do, if your initial conversation, you have a different assessment than I do, all of that works together to build a picture of, is this a candidate that we want to take the risk of moving forward with? I feel like it'd be helpful to kind of talk through your process, because there are multiple points that I think are really valuable in how I feel like you evaluate a candidate deeply, but also in concert with a lot of people weighing in on it. So do you want to just kind of mention your...
Sure. And this is what I have evolved to at the moment, like the last 2 years probably or so. This is what I've been doing. I recently, we had a seminar we went to that basically said a lot of this we shouldn't be doing. So I'll just throw it out there. It's what I'm doing right now, and we'll see. Of course, the person giving the seminar was not a dental person. They work in like corporate. So I feel like it wasn't exactly apple to apples, and I can kind of see his perspective on things. Anyway, all that to say, maybe next year, if we are continuing to talk about this, I might have evolved some in what I'm doing, because it's always, you're always tweaking your processes. But I feel like this has been kind of my go-to, where I will post on like a dental post or an Indeed or whatever it is, and I text now. So I don't even bother calling or anything. I don't even like email, honestly, because I feel like everybody's phones are glued to their wrists, and that's the best chance that I've got to get your attention. And so I'll put, hi, Bethany, thank you for replying to our dental post. Please tell me, what are you looking for in a new work home, and why should we hire you? Thanks so much, Dr. Kuba, Children's Dental Center of Irving, because I want them to, if they've sent out 100 resumes and they don't know which one I am, I'm kind of giving them a clue there. And then I know it's going to sound like super petty, but it works, and maybe it's just nuanced to me, but it's important to me. So, because I've had a candidate, one of them that we let go more recently, who made all the cuts through our process that I'm about to finish going through, but then she came and then she gave some bogus excuse for why she couldn't come in one day, and she spelled my name wrong, and that to me was like, if you're the sterilization tech, maybe it's not so important, maybe an RDA, but you're front desk. And I've got 4 letters to my last name, and you couldn't spell it right. Yeah. After you've had texts, and you're texting me, so you couldn't bother to pay attention to detail. So that, to me, that right there is what got her fired, honestly. Yeah. And I know some people are like, are you out of your mind? Maybe. But I knew that was something I wouldn't be able to get past longer term. In any case, so I do that for a reason. Because, one, I'm asking you 2 questions that I kind of want to know. When you reply, are you able to answer those questions? Yep. And I'll give you an example of that in just a minute. But then also typos. What is your... So the one we ended up hiring, who left on maternity and who'd worked with us for like a year and a half, was not a person I normally would have. On paper, she had no dental experience. She was, cosmetology wannabe. Like, she wasn't a full-blown hairstylist, but kind of worked in a salon, had maybe worked for 6 months in a dental lab. And I'm like, that has nothing to do with anything as far as, she thought that would help get her foot in the door. But I'm like, that has nothing to do with pediatric dentistry. Why did I hire her? Well, she was the only candidate of everybody who replied who, A, put, hello, Dr. Kuba, thank you for replying. She got my name spelled right. The reason what I'm looking for in a new work home is blah, blah, blah. Whatever she said was quite savvy. And then she had number 2, you should hire me because blah, 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 whatever her answer was. The same pool of people that had replied at the same time, I want to say the other 3 people that replied were all dental people. One had 15 years of dental experience. Her answer was not, hi, Dr. Kuba, not, because again, I look for that. Like, how many people are going to pick up on that this is the doctor replying to you, and you should address me as such. Because I'll have some that'll be like, hi, Miss Rena, or hi, Rena. I'm like, dude, you did not catch the attention to detail there. Yeah. I have told you, I am the doctor texting you. And I know that sounds elitist, but to me, I'm just trying to pick up on details, respect, manners, common sense, like all of the above. And maybe that's old school, but that matters to me. Yeah. So in any case, I had this dental one who'd been in the dental field at a front desk for 15 years. And her response was, one, so no salutation, no greeting, anything like that. But one, I was just let go from my previous job. And I'm just like, you would put that?
You put that in a text message.
I'm asking you, what are you looking for in a new dental home? And you're basically telling me I'm looking for a job because I just got fired. That's
what?
So to me, just even on a level of common sense, that is such a dumb response that I was like, ugh. And then two, what are you looking for why should you hire me? Something like, because I've got years of experience and I'm available, something like that. And I was like,
this is so, yeah.
Yeah, this is like bottom of the barrel. Like, you are not selling yourself whatsoever. And I don't respect that you can't even make crap up to impress me. Like, that's the best you can do. So I know. And in fact, I think we did bring her in for an interview.
Yeah.
And she was just as janky as her answer came across. I was like, God bless wherever you worked for the last 15 years, because no.
And I know why they fired you.
Yes, I do. It was not good. And so, again, maybe she'd be fine for a adult office that has very little customer service as their priority. No, you are not going to be around my tough mama bears and daddy bears who will barely let their kids get a sealant because they're so mistrusting. Like, you're not going to be the person that's going to be successful in this role. And then the second one, same thing. Maybe whatever answers they gave were fine answers, but just full of typos.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I just can't. It's a front position. So I hired the nail salon the hair salon person, and she did wonderful.
She was great.
She was great for the year and a half that she lasted until she had a baby. No bitterness in that tone, right?
Not at all. Dang babies.
Don't people want to earn a living? This baby's just going to suck it all out of you.
Literally.
Says the pediatric dentist. So, anywho, so I text this. So then a lot of it, I won't have people even reply back. Okay, well, that tells me then that you didn't have anything eloquent to say, or you couldn't take the time to sell yourself, or you had 10 other job offers and you didn't want to bother with mine. Mm-hmm. Great. That's all fine. So move on. And then the ones that do respond and that don't have all of these issues with their response, then I'm like, when are you available to come meet us? Mm-hmm. So it's not a work interview. And some of them will ask, is this an interview? Is this not an interview? What should I wear? So I like all of that.
Yeah.
I like if you're asking. If you don't ask any questions, I'm like, what are we getting? Are you even going to show up?
Right.
I do not, if they ask me for my address, I do not give it to them, and they're pretty much not on my radar anymore. Mm-hmm. Why? I mean, again, I know I sound really petty and picky and mean, but to me, I'm like, again, your phone is glued to your wrist. Mm-hmm. And so you could easily Google me. I already gave you the name of my practice.
Yeah.
Even though you could probably gotten it from Dental Post. So if you're not going to figure that out, then what can I? Mm-hmm. What are you going to need your hand held for and spoon-fed here? So the savvy ones that I'm like, please check out our website. So I don't give them the website. I'm like, just please check out our website for directions and to learn more about us. I look forward to meeting you. Do not give them a reminder. I don't do anything. Mm-hmm. My favorites are the ones that text back and are like, a day before, 2 days before, I just wanted to affirm my interview. Mm-hmm. Damn, that's impressive.
Like, thank you.
Thank you, God. Yes. So once they come in, then I'll have like whoever, greets them, give them a tour, do all of that. And then I tell them, I'm like, you're welcome to hang out for 10 minutes, or you could be here for 2 hours, whatever time you need to see if this environment's proper for you. Mm-hmm. If I don't see you before you leave, I'll check in with you later. So that's basically like saying, I'm not going to spend any time with you right now. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of times you get the feel and vibe of a place just by walking in the door. And if they've already determined that this is not the vibe, it's like online dating. Like, you get along great when you've read each other's profiles and you start emailing and texting each other, and then you finally have that date and you're like, oh God,
yeah,
like, what was I thinking?
Gonna work.
This is not going to work, right? And so if anybody hasn't online dated, those of you that have know exactly what I'm talking about. So I don't want to waste anybody's time if they're going to walk in and go, this was just not what I was envisioning.
Right.
For the ones that we do, or, if we're kind of going, this is not a good fit, then we've dodged that bullet as well. Mm-hmm. And then for the ones that are interested, next step is you talk to them. Mm-hmm. Because I just want to know what you think from their phone skills. And
I don't even talk to them unless you give me a favorable response.
Yeah.
So if the team as that person hung out, if the team was like, oh, no, or we've got some concerns about her, if you get any negative feedback from your team, it's over.
Yeah.
They never even make it to me. And so really it's your team's feedback that then determines whether or not they're going to talk to me.
So then I can imagine a listener going, okay, miss, with your system and process, how did you hire 2 back-to-back that were just duds? How did they get through your process? I mean, and I think about that too. How did you get through my process? One of them, I think I just kind of jumped a little bit ahead and went, okay, I really liked her responses. Yes, she had some typos, but overall her answers were pretty good. And then she went to high school with one of my RDAs, and I was like, okay, so they're going to be able to, she's going to go, oh, well, this person works there. I kind of know her, and vice versa. And then she came and she interviewed well, too. Like, the team liked her.
Yeah.
It wasn't until she had been there for a week that some of these signs started showing up. You talked to her, you liked her, and you didn't get any red flags off the questions you asked her. Then the second one we hired hot on the heels, that one we kind of knew. This was going to be either
hit or miss.
Yes. Not a lot of gray. And we even had one, our very phlegmatic, that's another one of the personalities. So we've talked about choleric, sanguine, this is phlegmatic. Phlegmatic is just very even keel, very little bothers them. She's the one after the work interview was like, maybe even before the work interview, I think even at that meet and greet, she was like, I don't know that this person's going to pan out well. And of course, I jumped in to make excuses. I was like, well, she didn't know this because she's not truly dental. And well, the reason I'm looking at her is this. And so, of course, my phlegmatic person was like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, she wasn't going to push back. She said, okay. And sure enough, as soon as the week, we hired her, she onboarded, we fired her a week later. And she said, I told you shouldn't have hired her. And I'm like, dude, I should have listened to the phlegmatic, because phlegmatic never says anything.
Yeah.
And the fact that she felt bold enough to say I don't think this is the right fit, I should have been listening more to the voice that doesn't normally speak. So it's not a foolproof system by any means.
Well, and it's almost like the system falls apart when we really don't lean into it, right? So that example you just gave, like, your phlegmatic spoke up and said, I don't think this person's going to work out. And that was valuable feedback that you would normally listen to. And in that moment, for whatever reason, you didn't, kind of dismissed it. And ultimately, we were both wrong on that candidate.
And I probably dismissed it because I was somewhat desperate. I didn't have another candidate. I'm like, okay, this one's not going to be perfect, but I'm hoping with a little bit of time, we can train this one up. Like, she's not who we would have picked normally, but that's all I've got interviewing. And then after that experiment, I was like, never mind. Like, now we're not going to look to hire. We're just going to see how we make do and what we can shuffle around. And we've been fine with that, honestly. And then out of nowhere, a previous employee recommended somebody. And so she starts next week, and let's see what happens. Yeah. But I'm not holding my breath in any way.
But she still, even though she knew somebody that used to work for you, she still went through the same process.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's key is it's a consistent system, but it's shared by, honestly, your team. And your team knows, I think this goes back to a lot of the communication things we've been talking about, that their voice is going to be heard, that you want their feedback, that they're a part of the process. They're helping to pick who they want to work with and who they don't want to work with. And so they're very invested in that meet and greet. They want to get to know them.
And I encourage them. I'm like, please, like in morning huddle, I'm like, hey, don't forget, Abby's coming today. Everybody, please try to talk to Abby. Now, she's applying for RDA. So RDAs, I need at least 2 of you to spend at least 5 minutes with her. Talk about whatever you want to. Talk about your dogs. Talk about your kids. Talk about your favorite restaurant. I don't care. Just get a vibe and a sense for this person. Yep. And then same for the front. I'll always have to try to remind them, hey, guys, don't forget, this is the person that's going to work alongside you.
Yep.
I need to hear your feedback.
Yeah. So I think when we take that in-depth of a process and we apply it to my client that we've been talking about with his issues, we have to speculate if there was a system like that in place where some of the hiring burden was shared with the team, where the team had feedback, where it wasn't just this is office manager's pick and dentist doesn't like it, or vice versa. This was dentist's pick and office manager does it, rather than it being a decision among the two of them. It's spread among, okay, I've gotten feedback from the team. This is what they're saying about the candidates. If it would have lightened the weight enough a bit to make it less stressful. And then also if it would have been a more thorough and comprehensive process so that it wasn't just his choice versus her choice.
So I'm going to go back again here and just say, but what if that was the only choice?
Yeah.
Then what?
Yeah, then I think, again, it becomes a collective conversation with the whole team where the team knows we're ultimately doing some compromising in this because we know we're understaffed. We've got to have a body. She's going to have a very limited skill set, so we're going to have to really focus her on whatever, data entry and entering insurance checks. Maybe that's all she's doing, but hopefully that provides enough relief that we can continue to look. So what I don't want is the team to go, what were they thinking hiring this person? Like, she doesn't fit us at all. That goes back to having that open communication. We realize we're making a compromise on this employee. We do not envision her super long term. She's here to fill a spot for now. And let's all remember that. There's going to be moments of frustration that we have because she can't do X, Y, and Z.
Okay, so I'm going to interrupt you there. Are you setting her up for failure if the team's like, she's only part-time here anyway, and then now she comes in with that vibe? I guess I would maybe say, like, this is all she can do for now. Let's see how she picks these up. Let's see what kind of relief, and then let's come together. And I think this is what I like about that, or what we've done that has worked out again with the team approach is y'all help me figure out how to onboard her and like what are things that you want off your plate that you think you could train her in. Like, let's build her day and her schedule. So right now you're entering paperwork stuff. So that goes to her. You are scanning in papers. That goes to her. You are getting consent forms ready, and you can make a quick SOP on how to do that for her. And you are doing the blah, 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 blah. Like, can you make a sheet for that for her? And those are going to be her 4 tasks that I think should free you guys up quite a bit. Let's see how she does with all of that. Then, we'll have her do those 4 tasks for the first 4 weeks. If she's not making any headway, then we sit and we figure out
where to go from there.
Yeah, and you too, like, if y'all want to keep her, I'm hiring for you. So make sure to spend the time to invest in her and see where she's going to be successful.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, that's super helpful from a training standpoint because also the people that hire are usually the people that also train. So you go from the frying pan into the fryer, like, I'm exhausted from having to find this person and now I've got to train them. And so it disperses that responsibility also among the team, but you give them a very clear, like, hey, we got to keep it narrowed down and focused with this one. But I love like a team training type model as well.
When I can go and say, hey, what do you want off your plate? It makes that person feel so important and so seen and so validated or whatever. Like, I see that you're busy. If there's something I could take off of you, what do you want to keep and what do you think? And if they're like, oh, well, she needs to take insurance verification. Okay, she has no idea what that means. She's new to dental. She's a hair person. Yeah. So I know you'd love to get that off. I can't take that off of you. But what could she take off of you that would be? And then as she's here and as we like her and as we see if she fits in with the culture and can learn these tasks, then we add on to her plate. But you keep me posted on that. You let me know how it's going. And it's just puffed up that person. They've got so much responsibility now.
Exactly. And then they view that person differently. This is not just my new headache that I've got to try to manage. This is a person that the doctor hired to help me.
That I get to help mold.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you what I want.
Yeah.
Somebody did that to me. My turn. I get to have you do what I want you to do, the way I want you to do it.
Yeah. And then again, I think retention becomes easier because the team wants to retain somebody that they're invested in. I think it just has long-lasting effects. First of all, for the hiring process, it makes it not dilutes the process. It just makes it an easier process to walk through if we've got multiple people involved, multiple perspectives, and then that moves right into more of this team model of getting the new employee up to speed and onboarded and retained in the practice.
So I think that targeted we talked a lot. I kind of segued off, but the point was that doctor, office manager were having some friction. I think the summary point was that we need to look at personalities and consider how you're coming across. Are you expecting to have a mind reader? If you guys are not the same, and chances are you're not. I mean, you don't want multiple of the same. It's not a good thing anyway. But how do you draw more people into the fold that could be helpful? One thing I want to come back in another podcast that we didn't get to talk about here was how do you build in backups?
Yes, I think that's the critical point of all of this, because we could have the best hiring process ever, and I feel like we've got a strong process in your office, but ultimately you and I are always thinking about backups. Even when we haven't had a lot of turnover, we're constantly evaluating. And
but that's because you taught me that.
Yeah.
You taught me how to do that, because my number one fear for years had been, well, what if this office manager leaves? And when she did leave, so I'm giving a teaser for next episode, we didn't miss a beat, really. Yeah. And that's because of all the groundwork you had laid. And I think at one point I had said something and you're like, we got it. I'm like, what do you mean we've got it? How do you? And you're like, well, we've done this, we've done this. I'm like, when did we do all of that? And you just looked at me and you were like, that's what you pay me to do. I'm like, oh yeah. All right, good. Glad somebody's on it, right? Like, not even on my radar. Like magic. You, this fluffy, magical unicorn came in and fixed it. But if you don't have a fluffy, magical unicorn,
you got to have your own plan.
You got to have your own plan on what are you doing. So we can talk about that.
That'll be our next one.
Okay.
We'll keep them on a cliffhanger.
There you go.
Thanks for joining the conversation today. We hope that you are comforted in knowing that you are not alone. But we also hope that you're walking away with some really great tips and tricks to try in your practice. We value your feedback, so please take a few moments to rate and review the podcast. Finally, we want to make sure that we're covering the topics that matter to you. So track us down on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what topics you want us to cover. As always, please know that we are rooting for you today as you manage your dental drama.